It is my great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker today, who is one of us, and she just became a licensed Unity teacher. And we are so proud of her, and we just are going to benefit so much from any lesson Meg may give us, because she is a wonderful speaker, and she so enjoys being with this community. And if you've taken her classes, you know that she is just wonderful. So she will be following the 12 Power of Inspiration today. So please, let's give a very warm welcome to Meg.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, for the meditation, a little music might be nice, but you sit. So I'm going to try to do some slides. We'll see. This is all new to me. So thank you for your patience and your love. I always love looking out at everybody's faces and all the love coming back to me. So I've been invited to share with you some insights and observations about what I think is really one of the more fun powers, and that's imagination. Or in comic book parlance, we can think of it as a superpower. So because, yes, we all do have superpowers, and even if we're not Superman. So a few weeks ago, Reverend Patricia introduced us once again to the 12 powers. And since they're just so fundamental to Unity teachings, I mean, I know many of you, if not most or all of you, know what the 12 powers are, but there's always so much more to unpack. So they're worth revisiting truly over and over again. The 12 powers, just to remind you, as identified by our founder, Charles Fillmore, are inherent in all of us. And together they comprise our divine nature. I'm going to see if I can move that forward, move past that. The late great Unity teacher and master metaphysician Paul Hasselbeck, you might remember Paul, he spoke to us once during COVID, and he's recently passed. I'm so sorry about that. But he was a true superhero, and when it comes to teaching metaphysics, in the Unity movement, he called them the 12 components of God's image and likeness in humankind. They are, Hasselbeck said, the divine ideas that constitute the pattern of perfection within us. So while we all have these powers, though, we're always not necessarily using them to their divine potential. And they can just sit there gathering dust in our toolbox, you know, like the old wrench and the drill bits that we're actively not using because we're avoiding some home repair project. But if we actually did, it would make our whole life easier. And that's the same way when we use our powers. You know, we really can make our whole lives richer and more interesting and actually a lot more fun. So when we recognize that we have these powers, we can use them to more fully express what in Unity we call our Christ consciousness. And that's the highest and the best within us. And we can also use them to have a richer and more fulfilling life just while we're inhabiting this body now. So when you think about it, that's a pretty exciting prospect. And developing these faculties is truly a lifetime pursuit. It's not like abilities that are dependent on our physical strength, you know, like skiing, or maybe our intellectual agility that might diminish a little bit as we age. You know, we may eventually have to give up skiing, you know, or running as our knees give out, or, you know, maybe we have to give up that demanding job, you know, when we just don't have that kind of mental agility to keep up with the rapid changes and the new ways of doing things and stuff. But the cool part, our strength of spirit transcends our physical body, including our brain. So as part of our exploration of these superpowers, I just want to lead you on a journey into our power of imagination. Let's see if this works. So let me start by making a quick stop in fairyland. There and this is a little story. There once were two little sisters who shared a bedroom in the basement. And beside their room was a big empty family room with absolutely no furniture in it. And because it had no furniture, it really became an inside playground for the two little girls. It could be anything they imagined. It could be a jungle, or it could be a castle, or it could be Paris, France. And one night, the littlest sister awoke to see the face of her big sister looking down at her, shaking her shoulder. But she didn't look like her big sister. She was dressed up like a fairy princess in this glittery dress with a tiara on her head. Really, it was her Halloween costume, but the little sister was eager to play along. "So come with me," the big sister whispered. "We're going to fairyland." Well, the little sister took the hand of the fairy princess, who was her sister, and in faith, just knowing that they were going to go somewhere really amazing, the big sister opened the bedroom door and led them straight into a magical world of their shared imagination. And they flew about the room like fairies, and the fairy princess waved her wand, sprinkling fairy dust, and they danced by moonlight that was pouring in through the sliding glass doors. And they scampered about among meadows painted in wildflowers. And surely, as they saw it, it was fairyland, created in an empty space of endless possibilities through the big imaginations of two little girls, picturing in their minds what their eyes could not see. And that was a true story. I've just never forgotten the magical night my big sister woke me up and took me to fairyland. So we often associate imagination with children's play, right that. And we think of imaginary things as not real. But the good news is we don't outgrow our imagination. We can learn to use it for more than just pretend. Through our power of imagination, we can conceptualize and then co-create with God fresh ways of living, thinking and expressing and understanding. And we can then manifest those into being, into reality. And we can use imagination to bring more joy and more creativity into our lives. And we can use it to gain a deeper understanding of spirit. So if we were to define it, imagination is the power of our minds to form thoughts drawn from divine ideas out there in the ether, as Charles Fillmore described it, and turn those things into mental images. And they may not be like an exact rendering of the thing that we're imagining or may eventually imagine into reality, but they actually do have color and they have variety and dimension. And they may show up more like symbols or archetypes, like those described, by Jung and Joseph Campbell, and that are universally recognized across all cultures and in different parts of the world, and that often show up in our dreams. So Charles Fillmore wrote in his book, The 12 Powers, "It is through the imagination that the formless takes form." So often, we just bypass our imagination. We go through life, we act out what we've seen, we act out what we already know, been taught or told by someone else in the, outer world. And it's easy and it's safe to do that, but we're really merely copying what's already been done or someone else's idea. But with our power of imagination, that's sparked from deep within us and from the divine realm. Let's see this. So as you may remember from Patricia's talk, a few weeks ago, Fillmore associated each power with one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. And the apostle for the power of imagination is Bartholomew. And just to confuse you and keep you on your toes, like the Bible always does, Bartholomew is actually called Nathaniel in the book of John. And why? Well, many scholars believe that Bartholomew was a surname. That was a last name that he went by. Sort of like it reminds me of my days working as a reporter. You guys might know me as Meg, but when I was in the newsroom, I was always McConhey. So anyway, in John, 1:48, Bartholomew or Nathanael asks Jesus, "Where did you get to know me?" And Jesus replies, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." So the fig tree, metaphorically, represents abundance and prosperity and blessings and all those good things that we harvest when we use our power of imagination in positive ways. Fillmore chose Bartholomew as the power of imagination because Bartholomew represents envisioning, which is the active part of the imagination. So Jesus is just saying he envisioned Bartholomew in his mind before he ever met him. So Fillmore also assigned a location in the body. You might remember Reverend Patricia talking about that as well, where each of the power is generated. And the power of imagination is located right between the eyes. This is the nerve center, or the third eye, and that allows us to see beyond the limitations of our two eyes. And in some Eastern spiritual practices, the third eye refers to the portal that leads to the inner realms and those spaces of higher consciousness. And it's often associated with visions and precognition. Again, like Jesus envisioning Nathanael before he ever laid eyes on him. It's also been linked to this idea of the screen of the mind, where divine ideas like health and prosperity and harmony are projected and shaped and ultimately brought into manifestation. So imagination also is closely associated with the power of faith, and that's located behind the brow. So faith enables us to see beyond present limited circumstances and to just trust in the outcomes we have not even seen before. So you can see how closely related those two are. The things that we actually can imagine into being. So imagination enables us to conceptualize new ways of doing things and new ways of seeing and expressing ourselves and new and better ways of perceiving the world. And it's limitless. So just as you don't outgrow imagination, you don't also out-age it. You don't age out of imagination. Some of us may think as we get older or settle into retirement that we've played it all out. Now it's time to just turn on the autopilot and, cruise through our remaining years on what we already know. But think about this. We don't really have to stop imagining and bringing new things into our lives. Maybe, in our 60s or 70s or 80s, we're not going to take up free solo mountain climbing or windsurfing or something like that. But, we're not going to apply to med school and become, a neurosurgeon. But, we can bring new ways of expression into our lives and try new things. I think of my grandmother. She inherited an old upright piano when she was in her 60s, and she learned to play that, and it brought her so much joy. So I have another friend who's in her 60s now, and she has never painted before or actually showed any aptitude for art. But one day she just went down to Riley Street and bought an easel and showed up at a plein air, painting class. And just say, I'm going to try it. I'm going to imagine myself as a painter. And, it's interesting. She did produce some really nice canvases. So we can use our power of imagination to bring forth these spiritual ideas throughout our lives, to reimagine who we are and what we can do, no matter, how old we get or even physically infirm. Our power of imagination remains undiminished and powerful, all-powerful. Let's see. But we must look deep under the surface of what we already see and know, using our inner eye to find those ideas that are beyond our direct view. So I should mention that each of the 12 powers is also assigned a color. And the color for imagination is light blue. In many cultures, light blue is connected to the divine and to spiritual insight. And I like to think of that light blue reminds me of the sky and that scrim, that massive canvas that we can use for dreaming. So, they're like all the powers. There are a lot of properties that go along with imagination, and we can't possibly cover them all, and that's why we can revisit the powers over and over again. But since we have just a short time today, I'm just going to focus on two key ones. And the one is that imagination is a tool to free ourselves from false and limiting beliefs, those tired old habits and assumptions that leave us stuck and only doing what is familiar and what feels safe. And the other aspect of it is that imagination is the engine of creativity. We must first envision new images and focus on them before we ever bring them into being. And this aligns with our third unity principle, which is the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So knowing that, we must invite good thoughts, positive thoughts, affirming thoughts, in order to have positive outcomes. Kind of relate to that? I do. The realm of divine ideas is limitless, and here we can see things that we never thought of before. Solutions to problems, more effective ways of doing things, new ways to express our divine self. And, really, we're actually not just daydreaming. Imagination allows us to take those ideas, shape them, and envision them into being. And we're co-creating with God, or, perhaps better said, God nature. And this is in alignment with Unity's second principle, the I am. My very nature is divine. I have the essence of the Christ within me. There's no separation between me and God. And when I am in alignment with my own divinity, I am more able to express my highest self and discern not just ideas, but good ideas, great ideas. The 19th century inventor Nikola Tesla, who did not invent the Tesla car, by the way, but used his imagination to see complex systems and inventions. And he did it all in his mind with such clarity that he can build out this idea without needing detailed drawings. It was incredible. He called his mind his laboratory, and this is where he conducted experiments and perfected his designs. So the vision that he had for alternating current, electricity, came to him while he was reciting poetry with a friend. And he managed to draw a diagram just with a stick in the sand of this great idea. And his imagination allowed him to develop the concept for what came to be the basis of our modern electrical grid, all in his mind. So one of the most important things that imagination does for us is it liberates us. It's the key to the cages of our own making. We can hold thoughts or beliefs that imprison us and keep us stuck. Thoughts like, you relate to some of these, that's just the way it's always been, or we've always done it this way, or I could never afford that, or, we play back things sometimes that someone else told us, like a parent, a teacher, a sibling, maybe long ago, early in our life, may have told us in the distant past, and we just live that out for the rest of our life as if it's truth. Oh, you're not good at music, or, art is not your thing, or, your sister was always the pretty one, or your brother's the smart one, or I could never do that, or I'm too old to do that. But, ask yourself this question. Is there something I was told about myself, like some false belief, that I continue to hold on to as truth without questioning? Can you imagine that differently? So our imagination allows us to recognize our potential and to see the possibilities that we never saw before, and to envision and manifest a different future, whether that's for ourselves or, the world around us. The The second important thing about imagination is that it's the engine of creativity. It is where creativity begins. Like nothing happens if we don't imagine it first. Imagination ignites creativity. It revs the engine. It's our rocket ship to new worlds that we never imagined before. So how can we spark our imagination? How do we do that? How do we get that rocket off the ground? Well, the first thing we need to do is clean house. We need to scrub our consciousness of all the old thoughts that are cluttering up our mind and getting in the way of something new and fresh and better. So this is where we can engage another power, our power of renunciation, of letting go of all those old negative thoughts. And, grab our tools of denial instead. So, what would you like to manifest? What would you like to change? Think about that. Maybe it's better health, more rewarding work, a spirit more aligned with your inner Christ. Maybe you just want to continue to be a better person, show up better in the world, a person closer to the divine self, person more at peace within, more loving, more forgiving, more generous to others and to yourself. So deny all those things that you are not, and then affirm what you are already and want to bring forth. I claim imagination now. I visualize and imagine how to be the best person I can be. One thing to keep in mind about imagination is that it can't be forced. Gently invite an opening in your consciousness through prayer or meditation. Don't gum up the works, with negative thoughts or images. Just imagine your mind as a slideshow or that screen, or, it's the endless blue sky above. Don't think too hard. Leave an opening and a receptivity for divine ideas to appear and take form. The playground is limitless. As the writer Maya Angelou, who was like a great student of unity, once said, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. So in that sense, it's a regenerative power. In fact, the more we engage in the process of imagination and creativity, the more lucid our imagination and the more creativity we generate. But it's not enough to simply imagine. With our creativity engaged, we use it to produce something new and unique, and seeing beyond through our third eye what we see with our five senses. What is that? What's that going to be for you? A song, a poem, a painting, a craft. We can also use it to make meaningful, transformative changes in our lives, whether that's like in our outer health, like as Myrtle Fillmore did. We all remember, how she envisioned herself healthy and whole and into health and wholeness. Or a spiritual health, that's anchored in deep peace. But one thing, don't play small, dream big. So there are a multitude of tools that we could use to activate our imaginations. They're really kind of endless. These activities can serve as a kickstart to get us thinking more freely. You think of children. Children think freely. They're uninhibited. And, they just enjoy, without wondering what anybody is thinking or perceiving of them. And so sometimes it's really, can be very helpful to kind of get into a playful child consciousness. It was Hasselbeck, who I mentioned before, who was a great teacher of the 12 powers and taught, so many of us students, ministers, and licensed unity teachers about the 12 powers. And it was always so invigorating. But he reminds us of a few things that we can do to just kickstart. And one is visualization meditation. You can picture in your mind an outcome of something that you want to happen, or a place. Think of a place that gives you peace and comfort. Or you can make a vision board. You know, we've done that periodically, you know, here at Unity, and that's always like a fun exercise where you cut out images of things that you want to manifest, you know, in your life or your consciousness, and you make a collage of that. Another thing is just play. You know, embrace your inner child. You know, build with blocks or Legos, like something you know, like really might not ever consider doing, but you think of it as play. But what you're doing is unleashing your creativity. Maybe it's something with crafts, you know, or pen or pencils or glitter or whatever. I love to listen to my little 3-year-old granddaughter, she sits there and she makes her toys talk, you know, and all these little voices, and she's making up stories. She's creating stories that are giving life and personality to, you know, all these little inanimate objects that she has. And sometimes I sit down with her and I play Barbies like I did when I was like 3 and 4 years old. And, you know, we go swimming, or, you know, we may take our little bicycles out, you know, for ice cream. You know, you can and sometimes you can just go to the playground, you know, and watch kids. You know, and seeing what kind of things that they conjure up. When I was a kid, I used to imagine there was a like upright jungle gym, and it kind of looked like a rocket ship. So that's what I would do, you know, at lunch. Not playing Foursquare, you know, or tetherball or whatever. I would take that rocket ship. I'd usually grab a little friend, and we would go to other worlds, you know, play Lost in Space, if you remember that TV show. That was, you know, and the sand in the baseball diamond made a perfect lunar surface. You know, the other thing that you can do, like I mentioned, you can just look up at the clouds or the stars, you know, just like the ancients did, and see what patterns and shapes and pictures emerge. So there's a little exercise I might suggest if you feel inclined that you could try at home to kickstart, you know, just get unstuck a little bit and free yourself from those old thoughts and patterns. And I call it wild envisioning. So you just take a sheet of paper, and if you like to write, you'll have lined paper. If you're more of a visual thinker and you like to draw, then you can just get a plain piece of paper. And then maybe, you know, give yourself a certain length of time, about 5 minutes even, or 10 minutes. And think of some condition in your life or characteristic you want to change. You know, maybe you want to invite more friendships, or maybe you want to get more support in your life from other people. Maybe you want to stimulate some, you know, create some more creativity in your life. You know, it could be a hobby, or, you know, playing an instrument, or a multitude of things. Maybe it's just something in your spiritual consciousness that you want to manifest more fully. And this is an exercise you don't want to overthink. You just want to free your mind and start. So just start writing or doodling. You might even, like I said, set a clock timer and limit yourself. And just get on paper whatever comes into your mind. Words, ideas, images, symbols. You know, allow the pen to just be the conduit between, you know, the divine consciousness and your paper. And then just keep writing or drawing. You know, try not to stop. And then it's just, you know, you might find it very enlightening when you're done to just try and see if there are any insights or inspirations or visions that emerged from that. So viewed in a big way, what we can do with imagination is flip the scripts that we've been acting out for years, or maybe our whole lives. Do some of you feel like you've been acting kind of stuck on your script? I know, you know, I often have been. The Unity minister, Reverend Bronte Colbert, in an article on envisioning, said that there's a couple of key recommendations that might help us rewrite those old scripts that we keep acting out. And the first is to focus on what you'd like to experience or create in your life. You know, don't give energy to what you don't want. Ask yourself what you would love to see that would fill your heart, and lead to abiding joy. Allow your imagination to fill in the picture with the color and the shape and the dimension that I talked about. And please, don't be cheap. Don't be cheap with your dreams. In the spirit realm, you have a blank check. And now ask yourself, how will having this in my life make me feel? Will exercising more lead to more energy and self-confidence? Will shifting my perspective of someone or some situation release tension within me? Feeling good, whether it's in our bodies or our hearts or within our own consciousness, can be really a powerful motivating factor. So I just, want to leave you today, with this question that you can take home with you. Where will your imagination lead you? So in just a minute, we're going to take these ideas into a guided meditation, but I wanted to close with this, if we can get it up. We'll see. Yes? I think that's a yes, with a short little video that encapsulates the power of imagination to bring joy and excitement and wonder into life. Turn on the light. So now I want to take you on a short flight into your own imagination. Yeah, I think just a little bit of low music might be good. So could we dim the lights? Thank you. Good. So I invite you to settle yourselves in a comfortable position. Relax your muscles. Just loosen your neck, your jaw, your shoulders. Just anything that feels tight or tense. Just relax them. And now take a few deep breaths. Just slow your body down. Inhaling in peace. And allowing the peace to gently seep through your body, washing over you like a gentle wave on the shore. Your heart is softening and your mind opening. And the aperture is getting wider and wider. And the infinite, all-knowing, ever-present mind of God within you. And now you're actually aware of being one with that spirit. Now find a place in nature that feels peaceful and like a calming refuge to you. It's different for all of us. A quiet beach at low tide, maybe a lake, or lying on a carpet of lush green grass on an open hillside. Using all your senses, notice what is around you. The smells, the sounds, the grass beneath your feet, or the briny salt air gently passing over you from the sea, or the scent of pine needles from a nearby forest. What do you feel? the warm breeze on your face, the grit of sand between your toes. Can you hear anything? Water lapping, a bee buzzing, a bird calling. Now look up into a cloudless sky of pale blue. This is your canvas. I am open to the divine, loving spirit. If there is something that has been tapping at your heart or your consciousness, seeking change or desiring to see something differently, invite that feeling into this moment, gently, just gently, and without judgment. And simply open your mind's eye to see whatever images, signs, and shapes materialize on that big blue canvas. Invite only positive images that are spiritually enhancing and uplifting. I am open to seeing and receiving ideas, inspirations, new stories for myself, for the world, as I watch my mind's projections. And just take that into the silence for a few moments. I gratefully embrace my visions, and I claim my imagination. I use my power to shape and co-create new and better ways of being, spiritually and personally. And for this extraordinary power of imagination, this fun power of imagination, this engine of our creativity, we say thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is. And now I invite you to just gently bring your awareness back to your body in this place. And when you're ready, imprinting to memory what you have seen as you slowly open your eyes. Embrace it, welcome it in. Have fun with it. Thank you, God. So it is and ever will.